Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today. I have a beautiful, intelligent guest with me today. Her name is Nikki. She is a holistic coach, a mind-body practitioner who has devoted her time to understanding and teaching the interconnectedness of neuroscience and the mind-body connection. Nikki is now committed to helping others step into a broader and more expanded version of themselves. She shares the tools necessary to liberate people from the constraints of their subconscious mind and restore equilibrium in the body. Her work fosters a deep, authentic, and meaningful relationship with self that releases the idea that your worth is determined by any person, achievement, or anything outside of you. Through her own experience of darkness and adversity, she has equipped herself with life-changing tools to shine her own light so brightly so that others may set on a path to finding their own. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the beautiful Nikki. Thank you for having me. And thank you for being here today, I should say.
That's my line, Lewis. I'm supposed to say thank you for having me.
Well, I think it's just a blessing having your presence here, and I just wanted to say thank you. So thank you for joining, and I'm really intrigued to first of all hear your story, and I think from the conversations that we've had online and just from seeing each other's content, I think there's a lot of similarities with what we're into and
Mm.
similar values and the stuff we like to learn about and what we teach. So I think there'll be a bit of pitching and catching today. So I'm really looking forward to it. So without further ado, Nikki, I'd love to hear your story. This is my first time hearing this too. So I'm really looking forward to this. So please take us away and introduce us to who is Nikki? Who are you?
Yeah, what a first off beautiful introduction. Thank you. I'm really grateful to be here and speaking to all of your listeners today on today's episode. So, who am I? Great question. Well, I guess it's important to maybe just give your listeners a bit of context into maybe who I was and what kind of got me to where I was now. So a little bit about my story. And just a bit of a trigger warning around sexual abuse. So if there's anyone listening who right now feels that that's a trigger point for them and they're not quite ready to hear that just yet, that's okay as well. And we'll leave some resources in the comment section below in the info bio, so you can reach out to anyone if you need some help or some guidance. But of course, just to pre-frame the space to know what we might be bringing up in the story. So I'm going to jump right into it. And when I was a little girl, I was 14, I was sexually assaulted by 3 men. And that really rocked my world at the time because, you know, when you're 14, you're innocent. And then especially back then, you know, think about what we were doing when we were 14 compared to 14-year-olds these days. It was quite different. And I was quite innocent and naive to, I guess, like bad things in the world that could potentially put my life, you know, in danger. And because of my, I guess, ignorance and being naive to that, I really didn't know what to do with that at the time. I had a lot of shame around the incident, and I felt like a lot of it, Lewis, was my fault. You know, that I dressed a certain way, or that I was drinking, or that, you know, those guys thought I wanted it. And I think that women, we do get a lot of pressure that's put on us. And we take on a lot of that shame, thinking it's our fault based on how we dress, how we look, you know, alcohol that we drink. And so, you know, especially at such a young age, you know, I felt like I didn't have a voice. And I was so scared that if I shared my story and I told anyone, that they would judge me and they would say it was my fault. And so I bottled it up and I did what, you know, any 14 innocent young girl would do at that age, which was hide it and suppress it. But unfortunately, Lewis, by suppressing that memory and that incident, I also suppressed other parts of myself in order to cope with what happened, like my vulnerability and my power, my womanhood, and, you know, all my innocence. And because I suppressed them, I looked to cope, you know, fill that void through coping mechanisms like alcohol, partying, drugs, and sex. And I went through that scene all through high school. I started becoming friends with people who also thought that that was a way to, fill the void of happiness and, fitting in and having a sense of power. And I think I really needed that power because I felt that it had been taken from me by those, those three men when I was just 14. And so I went through this, my whole high school experience was like a power complex of me trying to gain back my power that I thought had been taken from me at a really young age. And I think there's a lot of women out there who can probably in some ways relate. The statistics are overwhelming for women who experience, sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual harassment. And a lot of women feel really shameful in their experiences and like they can't talk about it. Before I continue with my story, I just want to say for any women and men, listening out there, because this happens to men too, is that you're not alone and what happened wasn't your fault. And you did whatever ways that you coped with it, however you moved forward through your pain, your healing, your trauma, you did the best with what you knew at the time. So fast forward.
Thank you for being so vulnerable, by the way. I appreciate the authenticness in the way you're speaking. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I think it's really important because there's a lot of people out there, you're similar to myself. When I was on my healing journey, vulnerability creates space for others to be vulnerable. And it's been time and time where I've been vulnerable and there've been women that have said me too. Or Nikki, I never realized something that happened to me, and by your sharing it made me remember something that I suppressed when I was little, or something that happened to me that I thought wasn't a big deal, or I pushed away because I said it was my fault, or that I asked for it and I claimed fault. And these women have taken ownership back of their lives again through my first step of vulnerability. So I think it's really powerful. A lot of people think vulnerability is weak, and I think vulnerability is so damn powerful, so much power in it.
I totally agree. Please continue.
So fast forward out of high school, continuing to wear this mask, and really, I guess, to protect myself from being hurt. Because if I was vulnerable, right, if I was myself, if I was vulnerable, then I could get hurt. And so this mask became this very superficial protection mechanism. And I don't have any resentments to my teen self, my younger self, because I know that she was coping in the only way she knew was possible. And so because of the people that I was hanging out with, I got myself into a situation that eventually was going to happen. We went on a holiday, and at some stage in the holiday, my drink was spiked by where we were partying. And my friends, who I thought were my friends for 10 years, weren't really my friends to begin with, or they weren't after all. And essentially it was a big 3-day trip, as in a trip where I was stuck in the drug of the psychedelic trip. And my friends had abandoned me, left me in a hospital, and said, you're ruining this holiday, Nikki, and you need to leave this villa or we're going to leave you. And I felt quite no one chooses to be in a state where they are not in control of their body and seeing things that aren't really there, right? No one would really choose that, especially when they're on holiday and they want to have a good time with their friends. So again, I felt powerless. There's nothing I could do. I'm vulnerable. And I just felt that there was like this trauma that was coming up again of me not being able to, have my power.
How old were you on the holiday? How old were you at this point?
I was 21 back then. And so that kind of shattered my world because, here I was this was in Bali. I was stuck in a hospital. I couldn't get out of this hospital. I tried to tell them I was fine. And they said, you can't leave, essentially, that you're not right in the head. My dad had to come get me because my friends had abandoned me. I came back, and all these friends that I thought were my friends for 10 years, I now no longer wanted to be friends with. And I just looked at my life and I looked in the mirror and I went, Nikki, if those were the type of people you were hanging out with, what does that say about you? And what does that say about your life? And it was like this enlightening experience, Lewis. It was like my world had shattered, my ego had shattered, and this facade, this mask that I wore had finally fell down, and I saw myself for how I truly was and who I'd been through all those years. And it destroyed me at first, because I saw the ugly truth that was looking back at myself and who I had been through all those years. But, I often say, with like through death of my past self, through death of this superficial facade that I thought I needed to be, through death also offers opportunity for rebirth. And that was the catalyst at the beginning of my journey to becoming who I am today.
Wow. And how did that, are you still going with the story? Because I've already got 100 questions for you.
No, I reckon we could, we'll leave the suspenseful part. We'll leave it there.
Okay. That's incredible. Like, incredible for the story, and for obviously coming through that and shaping that into who you are today. And I know we study very similar teachers in Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. D. Martini. Mm-hmm. And I know you live in a world where everything has served you either directly or indirectly. And there's so many ways I'd like to take this, but I'd actually like to just continue on a little bit further along that story. You just said the mask had fallen off, and it awoke in you that death of that old self and that old friendship circle and that old life, and it's given you birth to the new chapter and the new beginning of being who you are now today. Where did you go from there? Because I find, and maybe some context for that question is, I find a lot of people have moments like that. They have those opportunities to change their life. They have the moment where they look in the mirror and they're like, who the fuck am I? They have the moment of when their friends do something, maybe not to the degree of what you experience, but something where they start to question, wow, is this really me? Is this me is this all I've got to offer? Is this me for the next 20 years? But then I find some people, or in my experience anyways, majority of people don't know where to start. It's kind of like, I would love more. I would love to grow. I would love to heal, but I don't even know where to start. So that feeling of the unknown is too scary to take any action. And they just go back to what's easy, those habits, those same friends. And it's like they just live in that lukewarm feeling for the rest of life, instead of going after the unknown, going after the growth, going after the healing. So with that context of that, where did you then start that healing process, the transformation, this new chapter to who you are today?
I think there's something really important in what you just shared for everyone listening is, like, Lewis and I can sit here for the next 30 minutes sharing tips and tricks to get started, but none of that matters if you, the listener right now, doesn't decide that you're going to actively be a participant in the life that you live, and that no one's coming to save you. No one's coming to hold your hand through your healing journey, through your growth journey, whatever it might be. That you have to be an active participant in what you choose in your life. And sometimes it takes a little bit of tough love for people who aren't ready to get started, who have, wishful thinking and merely declaring, I'd love to change. I'd love to have new friends. Oh man, I'd love to have friends like you. All your friends are so supportive. Oh, I'd love to have my own business. It looks like so much fun and freedom and flexibility. And a lot of people wish and would hope that they could have certain things in their life. But when push comes to shove, that they're saying ignorance is bliss, that the comfort bubble becomes much easier. And a lot of these things that we will share today are easy to do, but because they're easy to do, they're also easy not to do. And so you have to be willing to say, am I going to be an active participant in path A or path B? And then everything that right now in your life is a direct reflection of the choices that you've made. And so if there's something in your life that you're not happy with, there's something that you're wanting to change that right now is not serving you, that's because you chose that. And that can be a really hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. But when I look at my healing journey, for example, the people that I hung out with that essentially, abandoned me, I chose that because of the events that unfolded. But I can sit here and be a victim to that and let it hold me back, or I can use that as fuel to then help me grow and evolve and excel. And that adversity becomes like fuel to my flame to help me be ignited in this world. And so it's all a matter of choice. Of my choices have got me here, and I can't change them, but I can choose to act differently in this moment. And so choice is one of the most powerful things we have. And people have to be an active participant in, are they going to choose to be a victim where the world is conspiring against them? Or are you going to choose to be a powerful force where the world is here to conspire in your favor, to teach you things, to help you learn, to help you grow? And you just have to be the person to make that first step.
I'm curious, and not to hold you back from the answer you're about to go down, but at that moment of decision, when you had your moment, whether it was in the hospital bed, maybe it was when you went back and saw those friends, and you, I don't know when that exact moment was, but for some people, it's like, some people need I don't know the quote or who said it, but it's like some people need a breath, some air across their cheek. Some people need a slap across the face. Some people need to get hit by a bus to wake up, to make a change. And I'm just curious, obviously you're in this world and you help people in these situations. For people that are at that moment of decision, but they haven't made the decision, instead of waiting for that bus to come across and fucking wake them up, like the person who's overweight having a heart attack, or the business or the relationship, the partner asking to get divorced, instead of waiting for that painful bus to come driving past, do you have any advice on people that don't, so you don't have to wait for that moment, and you can make that decision now, and you can actually cross that bridge of decisiveness and actually start the journey? I don't know if that made sense.
No, that made perfect sense to me. I think what you're trying to ask is for people who, unlike myself, who had to hit rock bottom to experience an awakening or enlightening, that snap, boom, wow, I'm awake. I can see clearly for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
I've actually got a really simple thing, something that I really love to ask my clients when I get on a call with them. I ask them, why not stay the same? Why not stay the same? Because now, instead of you looking for evidence, because this is what the human mind does, negativity bias wants to keep you in a comfort bubble. It's going to look for evidence for why you should stay the same. Like, oh, but it's warm in bed. Don't get up early and go to the gym. Oh, but what if people judge you? Don't put yourself out there. The brain wants to keep you safe. And so now what we're going to do with this question is look for evidence for why we shouldn't stay the same. I can't stay here, because then in 5 years' time, I'm going to be the same person. And that's freaking painful. I can't stay the same because I got bills to pay. So I'm going to show up every day and apply myself to my business. I can't stay the same because I've got my team depending on me. So I'm going to learn these new things and deploy them into my business to help be a better leader for them. And so now the brain starts coming up with all this evidence to support why you need to grow. And if you can start to give your brain more evidence for that, it does help someone to go, right now is too painful. And the path of growth is scary and painful too, but this right now is too painful. And this is why I can't stay the same.
I love that. Beautiful answer. So to continue that question I asked before I asked the second question was, from that moment of decision of to heal to those friends are not for you and you deserve better, how did you begin that journey?
Good question. I always reflect on this, and sometimes I struggle to pinpoint exactly what the first step was. When I came back, I actually got a lot of retaliation and bullying from the people I went away with, because I obviously stopped talking to them. And I think they didn't appreciate the silent treatment, given that, I was going to see psychologists. I was trying to do some healing, working through my anxiety. And I actually probably went a little bit more into the darkness before I found the light. There's this really great quote by Rumi where he says, the wound is where the light enters. And I think by accepting the wound and not trying to just shove another Band-Aid on it like I did when I was 14, I kind of let that wound air out for a bit and allowed myself to feel the pain of what I'd experienced and honor it and accept it and welcome it in, rather than push it away and pretend that I was fine and talk to these people again when I knew it was wrong. And I started to think about what I valued in life and my moral compass and what was important to me. And it really started to just connect with myself again, ways that I had never done before, rather than denying and suppressing a lot of these parts that I did when I was so young. And so I think that there was a lot of acceptance in the initial and early phases that I needed to go through of processing what the bloody hell happened when I was in Bali and what happened to me.
And if you're okay, me sharing or you sharing this is I'm a slow learner. I think that's a good thing because it makes me get the details of things. If
Yeah.
like you were to say to the everyday person, feel into it more, connect with yourself more, and learn to love yourself more. What does that look like? How would you do that? How would someone listening today, without just sending you a message, which they will, and hit you up, but how would
Mm.
someone actually get that ball rolling and say, you know what, I've been through I've been sexually abused, I've been mentally, emotionally, I've been through a lot of pain in my life, and you're absolutely right. I've been band-aiding it. I've been partying. I've just been avoiding it. It's time for me to feel into it. It's time for me to connect myself. What are some practices or some tools or some skills that you've been able to develop to actually tangibly do that?
Yeah, I think that one of the really beautiful things I love teaching my clients is connecting back to their inner child.
Mm,
And the reason why that's so important is because a lot of the parts that have been traumatized or parts that have looked for needs in unsecure ways, right? Through relationships, through partying, through alcohol, through maybe numbing their pain through work, overworking, business, things like that, has come from unhealed inner children, right? Their inner child is unhealed and they're looking to fulfill those needs in external ways, right?
wow.
And so whether they've experienced something really traumatic like myself, or that maybe there's some needs that weren't met when they were younger with mum or dad not being around potentially, or maybe at school they didn't have enough friends or didn't fit in, one of the things they can do is then connect back to that inner child and find little glimmers or little things that they really love to do as children. And so for me, when I was a little girl, I was a free spirit. I was a dancer. I would do running. There was this one time where mum went to come and get me from school, and the teachers had lost me. They couldn't find, where's Nikki? Like, oh, like they looked at mum with this face, and mum knew. She's like, oh, don't worry, I know where she is. And she went out to this specific part in the school, and it was called the secret garden. And so I'm in there, frolicking around like a freaking fairy, making mud pies.
I love that.
And so, I was a really free spirited child. I couldn't be tamed. I would dance and I would be creative. And so a lot of my healing was connecting back to my creative expression, dancing again, singing, doing things that made me feel really happy. I started drawing and painting. I thought about taking up pottery, all of these things that allowed me to connect back to my inner child, because it's such a huge source and fuel for happiness.
I fucking love that. Oh, yeah, and even the way you're speaking, I'm just having like little light bulbs go off as well. I'm like, wow, wow, wow. Very, very, very relatable, the stuff you're sharing. One more question before we change a little bit into more of the science part of stuff, which I'm really looking forward to hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So, what would be the step after that? Step one, we're making a decision. You've asked the question, why not stay the same? You've learned to feel into it more, connect with yourself, connect with that inner child, and reflect on who were you when you were little, and where are those potential things that you're not doing anymore, or that you've started to have self-defense mechanisms in your life now because of what you went through as a child, whether it be not getting the love you wanted from your parents, or not being good enough for your parents, or not being rejected from the girl at school, whatever happened. What would be after that? What for you anyways? What in your journey?
Honestly, I can't wish. I don't like having wishful thinking because it doesn't change the past. But what I would have loved is that when I was on my initial phases of my healing journey, was to have a mentor that understood exactly what I was going through and could give me the answers. Because from that journey, and I think everything happens for a reason, and I had to go through the journey that I did to get where I am today, and I wouldn't change a thing at all. But if it was my wish for someone listening, it would be to get a mentor to guide you. Because what I thought once I claimed my power back, Lewis, was like, oh, I'm going to be a bodybuilder. And I thought that I was then going to find my empowerment from that. And plot twist, I ended up with body dysmorphia and, eating disorders and all sorts. But I needed to go through that to then now relate to women in that industry and teach what I teach now. So things happen for a reason. I wouldn't change my past. But if I was to give advice to anyone listening, find a mentor so that you don't have to go through, 3 years of finding what works for you, to have someone who understands you, who gets you, who you can relate to, who you trust, who you can look up to as not just a mentor, but a teacher, a leader, and someone to like really guide you to the light and your path and your growth and whatever it is you're looking for.
I love that. I'm a huge fan of mentors. I got into the mentorish space when I was 18, and it's just like, I don't know if you can relate to this. It's like you said something similar to it. It's like you just see a different world. You're like, my first was Tony. That's what I got introduced to. And when I just learned like his matching and mirroring, rapport building. And it's like, I learned that I was like, what the fuck? Where the hell has this all been for? And
that's
I
a thing.
went down like a rabbit hole. I was staying up to midnight just watching his content. And I'm like, fucking hell, this is way more interesting than Pythagoras theorem at school. This is I love this shit. So I guess on that topic, because I think that's something that you and me can really relate to and align with, is just the love of learning and the love of, I guess, human behavior, neuroscience, how people act, and being able to decipher tools from incredible mentors out there, and being able to then apply that to clients and people in your life that you've impacted already. I'm curious on just what are some of the top tools? I'd love to know the top 2 or 3 that you find most impactful for yourself, and maybe a bit of science behind it, because obviously we could go for hours on the science, but we've got about another 20 minutes left here. I'd love to know the top tools and just some of the fundamental science that makes sense to the average person. Like for me personally, 2 of the bigger passions I love helping people with is anxiety and depression. I've got family members that have been on antidepressants for over 10, 15 years. I've had suicide attempts in my family. I was a really anxious kid. I was super anxious growing up with my upbringing, my parenting, my friendship circles. And so those were quite painful events for me, those my voids as a kid. And so they became quite important to me to this day. So I'm curious from your side of things, if you were to work with someone mentally and help them with some tools, what are some of the tools that you think are most insightful, most enlightening, and a little bit of the science behind it, so the everyday person it makes sense to? Because it's easy to say everything happens for a reason, find the blessings of what happened, and everyone say, well, no, it's not. No, it's not. You don't know what I've been through. You don't understand. But when you can actually explain science behind it from a atom energy, negative, positive charge level, sometimes that's what someone needs. But anyways, that was a long question. What are your top tools that you use, and maybe a bit of science behind it, so the everyday person listening right now, it's not just woo fluffy positive thinking shit. It's actually, you know what, this is why I'm able to do what you do.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm so excited. Where do I go with this?
I got so many tools. Which one?
So much room for activities. Step brothers. Okay, so I feel like the most powerful thing that I've learned through my time as a mind-body practitioner is neuroscience. I've learned a lot about psychology. I've done NLP. I've done cognitive behavioral therapy. I've done quantum physics. I've done law of attraction. I've literally studied almost everything there is so far. I'm sure there's so much more I can learn, but neuroscience was one thing that I was like, whoa, this makes so much sense. So I want to keep it really simple because it can get a little bit complex. And then I want to tie it into, we'll see how creative I can get here. We'll let my creative free spirit come out.
Let's do it.
Tie it into how I can, that inner free child. Yeah. So there's 3 parts of the brain that are really important to understand when it comes to creating change in our lives and achieving, the state of identity for who we want to be. And like in order to get there essentially, and overcome blocks that are holding people back from getting there. So the first important part of the brain to understand is our reptilian brain. This is the oldest part of our brain. And essentially, I mean, the name kind of gives it away. It's our instinctual brain responsible for our survival mechanisms, right? It governs fight or flight. And I'm sure that your listeners might be familiar with that language, fight or flight. But there's also 3 other survival pathways that we often don't hear about. So we have fight or flight. We then have freeze, collapse, and attach. And so freeze would be when maybe a car drives past really quickly and we got our headphones in, we don't hear, and we jump back from the curb and we stop and we go, we freeze. Collapse. Physically, you might pass out if you're on a plane crash. And attach would be when I want to be accepted and part of a tribe. And if I was abandoned and mum kicked me out on the street, I'd be homeless and nowhere to live and maybe nothing to eat, right? So they're physical survival mechanisms. But because we're not hunter-gatherers anymore, psychologically, freeze looks like, oh, I don't have a voice. I don't have any expression. I can't be myself. Collapse looks like an inability to get work done. So like burnout at work, like literally mental health breakdown. And attach looks like codependence, unhealthy relationships with work, men, in particular people, I shouldn't say work, it's more with people. And so these survival pathways are really important to understand, because when we're operating in our reptilian brain and we have things that are holding us back from being our best radical, amazing higher self, things like unhealthy attachments, burnout, inability to express themselves. With flight, the psychological survival mechanism is resistance, avoiding behaviors, sabotage, unhealthy eating. And fight is hypercriticalness, needs for control, rigidity. And so all of those things, when we look at them, which are all going to be really big resistances, or I should say obstacles for holding people back in relationships, in business, in their life, in their health, in their fitness, all of them are coming from their survival part of their brain. They cannot control it. It's your reptilian brain, and it's the oldest part of your brain responsible for keeping you safe. You literally have no control over that part of your brain. Once it kicks in, all your stress chemicals flood through the body, that's it. And so some people are probably thinking like, oh, fuck, like what do I do with that? Well, now we explore these other two parts of the brain. The second one is our limbic system. Now, this part of the brain is our emotional center, and it's responsible for how we feel things, whether things feel safe or not. And so we might go into an experience and we might have a little memory of, oh, remember that time when you were little and you got up in front of the classroom and you did that speech, that English oral speech, and the kids laughed? Well, that was scary. And now your boss wants you to do this presentation. Well, that also doesn't feel safe. So let's make you feel really anxious. Let's, tell the reptilian brain to come in and keep you safe. And so the limbic system is responsible for long-term memory. It's emotional center. And when things don't feel safe, it tells the reptilian brain to switch on. Now, the best part of our brain, if you're listening to this right now, grab your hand, open it up like you're giving someone a high five, but then slap it on your forehead instead. So, yeah. So right there in the front of your forehead there, the palm of your hand, is your prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for your best decision making. It's the opposite of your survival brain. It's rational thinking rather than irrational. It's higher executive functioning. It's like the CEO of your brain, right? It's the smartest part of your brain. And neuroscientists often refer to this as our new brain, right? As opposed to our old brain, our reptilian brain. And so when it comes to creating change, hopefully I've explained this clear enough for people to start to realize, I think Nikki's probably going to start to tell us that in order to change, we need to have our prefrontal cortex online. Well, you guessed it. Yeah. In order to change, we need to have our prefrontal cortex online. That's the part that's going to say, hey, this isn't scary. It just feels scary, but there's no fear here. I can get on stage and do a public speaking event. It's not scary. It just feels scary. And we can tell the limbic system, we can tell the reptilian brain, hey, I know the information you're feeding me is to fight or flight, run away, run off stage, forget my lines, but I'm going to reassure you that I'm safe. I'm right here in the moment. And this is how we can harness the power of overcoming our fears, of overcoming these resistances that are holding us back. Awesome. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's a good refresher. I haven't done this in a while, so this is good refreshing for me.
Nice.
Continue. And then how would you use that for a practical sense. So say someone was quite anxious. How would someone bypass the reptilian and the limbic system, or both parts of that brain, to tap into or utilize the prefrontal cortex to remove that feeling of unsafe, to remove those stress hormones, to have more control over themselves? How would you work with someone who's really anxious, for example, or really stressed or overwhelmed, or kind of how most 90% of people live day to day? How would you work past that with them?
Yeah, great question. This is a very complex way to answer. Well, it's not complex, but it's a complex question. It's because it really does depend on the person. I'm trying to figure out what would be the best advice or resource. Look, it depends. If everyone listening here prefers physical practices, we can go down that route. But I found like the most helpful thing for a lot of women who like to kind of tap into their thoughts and emotions is understanding the power of thought and the power of beliefs. Because when we have the belief that, let's say, I'm not good enough, if I have a thought or a belief that I'm not good enough, how do you think I'm going to feel? Am I going to feel good, or am I going to feel insecure? I'm going to feel insecure. Yeah, right. And if I feel insecure, do you think I'm going to feel like putting myself out there? Probably not. So I can't just like do things in order to change like my identity. I actually have to change how I believe in myself or my thoughts about what's possible before I can do something different. And so there's a really cool exercise I do with my clients. It's called Catch, Challenge, Change, right? Catch, Challenge, Change, CCC. And essentially what you do is you catch the thought that comes in first. And this can take practice, because a lot of the time we're operating in our subconscious mind, which makes up for 95% of our brain's processing power, right? We only have a 5% window of noticing our thoughts day to day. And we have 70,000 of them per day, right? 70,000 thoughts. So there's only, a very small window to catch them, and it takes practice. But as you do, you can be like, oh, I'm noticing this thought that's like telling me that, I don't have what it takes to get on a podcast and talk to Lewis. Like, why would his listeners want to care about anything I have to say? Catch the thought and be like, oh, I'm having the thought. And then you want to challenge it. Well, hang on. No one's expecting me to get on this podcast and be perfect. No one's expecting me to get on this podcast and know all the answers. No one's expecting me to get on this podcast and, be someone who I'm not. There's a reason why Lewis is asking me about my story. He doesn't want something made up and fabricated. He wants to know about me. So like, I have worth in this space. So we challenge the thought, right? Give it evidence why I can't stay the same. Give it evidence for why it's not true. And then we want to change it. And this part's really important. When we look at neuroscience, there's an important model called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity literally gives us the ability to change our brain structures. And thoughts create neurological pathways in our brains. And so if we know that neuroplasticity can change neurological pathways in the brain, well, then of course, if we just create new thoughts, we literally change our brain from the inside out. How cool, right? Think of it like as like an algorithm that you have on Facebook. You look at cat videos, you'll get 10 more the day after, right? It's kind of like that. We want to create an algorithm for happy thoughts or positive thoughts, supportive thoughts, whatever you want to call it. So you keep getting more of them, right?
I like that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll steal that one. Thank you.
I love analogies. I'm an analogy queen sometimes. And so the algorithm we're then creating has to be through a new belief. So for example, with the podcast example that I just gave, I am worthy of sharing my story. I am worthy of sharing my voice. And as I do so, by practicing vulnerability, I create space for others to do the same. All right. And now I feel good. Now I feel excited. Now my limbic system's like, yes, my prefrontal cortex is switched online because I'm using my conscious awareness, which switches on our PFC. And now I can have rational thinking and I can switch off the fight or flight brain.
I fucking love that.
So catch it, challenge it, change it.
Knows how to deliver when she gets a question thrown at her. Well done. That was awesome.
Thanks.
Last one before I guess we wrap up and say thank you and get some resources of where to reach out to you. Before we actually started talking, I asked, what was your morning routine? What does it look like? And you did mention meditation. That has been all around my world lately. It just people I've been speaking to, just the algorithm, not cats for me, meditation for me has been popping up a lot. I'm a dog fan, anyways. But yeah, meditation's just been in my world a lot lately, and my personal experience is I never bought into it. I always thought it just wasn't for me. I got too distracted. And then obviously learning from someone like Joe Dispenza, that's actually a sign that you need to do it a bit more. And just the benefits of it. And just, I would love for you to share your experience in meditation and why you do it and why you would recommend it for so many people these days. And I think that will be our last one for today.
Great question. So we can look at it from the lens of, I think, where should I go with this? Such a great question. I think what happens when Westernized society look at meditation is that they approach it from Eastern philosophies. For example, it's woo-woo. I'm going to have to levitate. I have to sit on the floor and say Om. And because they approach it from Eastern philosophies and they're not integrating it as a Western society, that's when people think they need to clear their mind. They think they have to sit on the floor. They think they need to do it for an hour. And all of those misconceptions are why people don't meditate. I'm going to twist everyone's mind and say this. You shouldn't meditate to meditate. No one meditates to get better at meditation. What do I mean by that? Well, if you think about why you go to the gym, no one goes to the gym to get good at the gym. You go for some sort of benefit, to either get healthy, to get a good body, to maybe overcome some injury, rehab, prehab. There's some sort of reason, like a why, for the reason you go to gym. You don't go to gym to get good at gym. You go to the gym because you're an athlete. You go to the gym because you're a bodybuilder. There's some sort of external reason or why or driving force. And because a lot of people don't know what that is when it comes to meditation, they apply Eastern philosophies. That's why they don't do it. So my first advice would be figure out why you want to do it in the first place. Does it need to be for like healing and higher self and spirituality? Nope. I have a lot of clients that come to me who are high achieving business women who run 6-7 figure businesses. And when I talk to them about meditation, I say, forget everything you know about meditation. We are doing it so you can be the best business owner in your industry. And when I make that distinction for them, it's like, oh, I can use that to be even better at what I'm already doing. Yeah. And so now we're starting to look at it as a Western society, as modern day men and women. And so for myself, I use it for a lot of that, a lot of biohacking to be better in my business, obviously a lot of healing because I do, tap into my feminine and spiritual energy. And it all drives from my driving forces and my why. So that part's really important. When I read the neuroscience behind it, that's when I was really like, oh yeah, baby, this stuff is good. So obviously we look at our prefrontal cortex. We look at studies in monks and Buddhists, and they did I think it's EKG or EEG scans. I forget the letters. They did scans on their brain, and essentially their neocortex, which is the squidgy gray matter, like if you were to look at a walnut, looks like that on your brain, the outside part of your brain, neocortex had more gray matter after meditating, right? So neuroplasticity, neurons that fire together, wire together, the brain is literally growing, and their prefrontal cortex showed more density. Wow. It also then crosses left and right brain hemispheres. So they say you only use one part of your brain. So that allows us to cross left and right brain hemispheres, tap into our corpus callosum, improve our memory. So our hippocampus, interrupt our amygdala, which is the part that releases stress chemicals. The science is overwhelming. It's overwhelming. The science out there, you can't deny that meditation is such a phenomenal practice for your mind, your well-being, your healing through your body. Literally, if you want anything in your life, just meditate. It's so good. It's the best.
I love that. Before we reach out and give all your socials and connections and where they can find you, what do you want to be remembered for?
Oh, to come in with the juicy questions, Lewis.
Just to finish it off.
I want to be known for. Oof. I want to be known for my service in serving humanity. When I went through my really scary experience in Bali, there was one night where I was laying in an ambulance and I thought I was going to die. And I made like a promise to a higher power, to God, whatever you call it, and said that, you know, with the second chance, I would like devote my time, my life to serving others. And that's what I want to be remembered for, because through my service to others, you know, it's what I love doing myself. It in some really nuanced, beautiful way, the more selfless and altruistic that I am for others, the more it fills me up and makes me feel connected to myself and my higher guidance, my light. And so for some ways it feels selfish, but my service to others is my vision, it's my true north. It's what I want to be remembered for. And being a really big thought leader. We've got lots of influencers out there, and I think we need more thought leaders like yourself, Lewis,
I like that.
to really change.
That's a good distinction. I've never made that distinction. And I absolutely subscribe to that. I absolutely agree.
I subscribe to that, yes. We need more thought leaders, because I think if we're hoping that society's going to change the way we behave, we need to start changing how we think first. We really do. Absolutely. So we've got lots of influencers out there, and some of them doing good things, but we need more thought leaders. So that's also, you know, a second thing I want to be remembered for.
I love that. Nikki, thank you so much for your time. This has been incredible. I think we could actually talk for hours, but the time isn't there today for us. Potentially in the future, I would love to have you back on in the future, to be honest. If anyone was interested in connecting with you, either your services or just to share some love or some feedback, or just check out your content, where can they find you?
Yeah, come and join me in my space, my podcast. It's called the Nikki Casa podcast. Nikki is double K, Casa is double S. So Nikki Casa with a C. And then I'm also obviously on social media, same thing, just Nikki Casa. And then I'm also publishing a book at the end.
I saw that on your story today, actually. I did see
that. Yes. I'm starting to announce that I've been keeping it MIA because it's been in the creative process. And when people ask questions through a creative process, it's hard to conceptualize when it's still being created in your mind. Yeah. So now the planning and the processing of it's kind of been done. I'm now sharing it with the world. So it will be publishing in December. And this book is about my life. It's about my story. I go really into detail about what happened when I was a little girl and in Bali as well. And then also more steps and some models that I've created as well. Hopefully we'll do a TED Talk one day on them. But yeah, definitely get onto the podcast. I'm on Instagram, and then of course the book will be publishing at the end of the year.
Incredible. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating with us today. Please reach out to Nikki. Please, if you got any value from this, guys, leave a review, comment, share. And as always, I say at the end of this, if you got some value, send it to one person. Teach one to help one. You might send this to one person who might get one thing out of this that could completely change their life. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I'll see you guys on the next episode.